Welcome back to another deep dive into the darkest corners of Fallout lore. Today's confession comes from someone who lived between two worlds, who saw the truth that both sides desperately tried to hide. What really survived the Great War in China? The answer will change everything you thought you knew about the post-apocalyptic world. Let's begin this journey into the Dragon's Veins, where 5 million souls waited in the darkness for their moment to reclaim the surface. My name is not Wei Chun. That was the name I gave to American surface patrols when they found me wandering the Shanghai ruins in 2227, radiation suit torn, my Mandarin accent thick enough to cut with a knife. I told them I was a scavenger from a small survivor settlement. I lied. My real name is Lieutenant Commander Zhang Wei, serial number 7392-Gamma, People's Underground Liberation Army, 3rd Deep Strike Division, and I am about to tell you something that will rewrite everything you think you know about who won the Great War. While your ancestors huddled in Vault-Tech's metal coffins, wondering if they would ever see the sun again, 5 million Chinese citizens descended into the Dragon's Veins. That is what we called them. The Dragon's Veins, a network of fortress cities built 600 meters beneath Chinese soil, connected by 15,000 miles of automated rail tunnels that stretched from the ruins of Shanghai to the edges of the Gobi Desert. We did not panic when the bombs fell on October 23, 2077. We had been preparing for this moment since the 1960s. I was born in sub-Beijing Fortress Delta in 2167, 90 years after the missiles turned the surface world into ash and radiation. I never saw natural sunlight until I was 25 years old. My childhood was spent in level 7 of the fortress, in a small apartment with gray walls and artificial daylight that cycled on a 24-hour schedule to keep us sane. My mother worked in the hydroponic farms on level 3, growing rice and vegetables under purple grow lights that made everything look alien and beautiful. My father was a tunnel engineer, maintaining the plasma boring machines that kept expanding our underground empire deeper into the earth. Let me paint you a picture of what American survivors never knew existed. Sub-Beijing was not just a bunker, it was 9 vertical cities stacked on top of each other, each level a complete ecosystem. Level 1 housed the Communist Party's regional command center, where General Li Ming's successors coordinated with the other 146 fortress cities across China. Level 2 was manufacturing, massive factories producing everything from power armor to nuclear submarines, all built in caverns so large you could fit 3 aircraft carriers inside them. Level 3, where my mother worked, held the farms. Acres and acres of hydroponic growing beds, fish farms, algae processors. We grew enough food to feed 2.3 million people with surplus to spare. Levels 4 through 7 were residential. Millions of people living in apartment blocks carved directly into bedrock, reinforced with steel and concrete. We had schools, hospitals, theaters, training facilities. Level 8 was research and development, where our scientists worked on genetic modification programs designed to create radiation-resistant new Chinese who could eventually reclaim the Wasteland. And Level 9, the deepest level, that is where we kept the really interesting stuff. Nuclear weapons, thousands of warheads stored in refrigerated vaults where radiation could not degrade the plutonium cores. Intercontinental ballistic submarines retrofitted for trans-Pacific invasion operations, equipment that would make your Brotherhood of Steel weep with envy. I grew up learning that Americans were surface-dwelling barbarians who destroyed themselves through capitalistic greed. Our history teachers never mentioned that our missiles contributed equally to the Holocaust. We learned that Chairman Cheng, our last surface leader before the bombs fell, had the wisdom to prepare for the long wait. That is what we called it, the long wait, 2 to 3 centuries of underground survival while the surface radiation levels decreased to survivable levels. The Communist Party's 5-century plan called for complete surface reclamation by 2277, exactly 300 years after the Great War. Do you understand what I am telling you? While American factions fought over irradiated scraps in the capital Wasteland, we built an underground civilization that made vault tech look like amateur hour. We had fusion reactors, not jury-rigged generators powered by salvaged parts. We manufactured new weapons, not just repaired old ones. We maintained our culture, our language, our entire 5,000-year history in the Archive of Superior Foresight, where I eventually worked. The archive was located in Sub-Beijing's Historical Preservation Corps, a massive library on level 6. Every book ever written in Chinese, every work of art, every technological schematic, every military record, we preserved it all. That is where I first learned about American vaults when I was 23 years old. I was cataloging captured pre-war intelligence documents, reports from Chinese spies who had infiltrated Vault Tech before the bombs fell. I actually laughed when I read about Vault 13's water chip crisis. We had desalination plants that could process seawater pumped from underground aquifers. We did not ration water. We had swimming pools. But here is what haunted me in those archives. Here is what kept me awake during my rest cycles, staring at the gray ceiling of my apartment. I found documents about something called the Dragon's Breath Protocol, contingency plans for eventual military operations against whatever American survivors emerged from their vaults. The documents were marked with red stamps that said eyes only, Central Committee authorization required. I should not have had access to them. But the previous archivist had died from a processing accident in the lower tunnels, and someone made a mistake with file classifications. The Dragon's Breath Protocol outlined a coordinated surface strike campaign. Reconnaissance teams would emerge first, assess American military capabilities, identify population centers and resources. Then came infiltration, placing sleeper agents in key positions within American factions. Finally, when the time was right, a full-scale invasion using our nuclear submarines to transport troops and armor across the Pacific. The goal was not coexistence, it was domination. The new world would speak Mandarin, not English. I served in the Youth Revolutionary Guard from 14 to 21, standard service for all sub-Beijing citizens. We trained in underground combat facilities, learned to maintain and operate power armor, practiced tunnel fighting, and surface assault tactics. Our power armor was crimson red with golden dragon insignia, designed to inspire fear in American forces. Advanced environmental systems allowed us to operate in radiation zones that would kill a normal human in minutes. Stealth systems developed in our research labs could render entire squads invisible to both visual and electronic detection. We tested them against captured American stealth boy units. Ours were superior. What really differentiated us from American survivors was patience, strategic patience. While your factions murdered each other over water and ammunition, we waited. We watched. We sent surveillance teams to the surface using periscope systems and reconnaissance drones. We monitored your radio communications, learned your languages, studied your tactics. We knew about the Brotherhood of Steel before they established the Citadel. We knew about the new California Republic before they annexed Shady Sands. We knew everything. My first surface expedition came when I was 25. Our unit, Reconnaissance Team Delta 7, was ordered to assess radiation levels and scout for potential staging areas near the ruins of Shanghai. We wore advanced environmental suits that made American power armor look antiquated, triple-layer radiation shielding, integrated air filtration that could process even the most contaminated atmosphere, heads-up displays with thermal imaging, and motion tracking. We emerged through a concealed exit point in what used to be the Shanghai subway system. The surface was worse than our training simulations prepared us for. Radiation levels still lethal after 150 years. The sky was a sickly yellow-green from atmospheric contamination. Mutated creatures that defied biological classification prowled the ruins. Things that might have been dogs once, but now stood 8 feet tall with exposed muscles and too many teeth. Birds with 3 wings and eyeless faces. and everywhere, this strange green fog that our sensors could not properly analyze. Later, intelligence confirmed it was some form of airborne forced evolutionary virus variant, probably released during the initial bombardment. We spent 6 days mapping the ruins before returning to sub-Beijing. 6 days breathing recycled air, eating ration packs, sleeping in shifts while 2 team members stood watch. 6 days seeing what humanity's hatred had created. The surface world was dead, truly dead, and yet I could not shake the feeling that we were preparing to fight over its corpse. Things changed for me in 2227 during a deep reconnaissance mission near what Americans called the Commonwealth. That is where I met my first American, a Brotherhood of Steel Paladin on patrol, searching the ruins for technology. He spotted me despite our stealth systems because I had made a rookie mistake, moved across an open area instead of using cover. We stood there, maybe 30 meters apart, him in that bulky T-60 power armor, me in my crimson suit with the golden dragon emblazoned across the chest plate. He did not shoot. I did not shoot. We just stared at each other. I could see his face through his helmet's faceplate. Young, maybe my age, scared, confused. He raised his laser rifle halfway, then lowered it, spoke in English over his external speakers. "What the hell are you?" I responded in English, a language I had learned from captured texts and radio intercepts. Chinese People's Liberation Army, Reconnaissance Division. The words felt strange in my mouth after years of speaking only Mandarin. His rifle came back up. "The Chinese died 200 years ago." "No," I said quietly. "We just went underground." We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Careful, wary, both of us aware that this encounter violated about 17 different protocols from our respective commands. He told me about the Brotherhood, about their mission to preserve technology, about the war they fought against super mutants and raiders. I told him about sub-Beijing, about the Shadow Empire beneath Chinese soil, about the millions of people who survived in our fortress cities. "Why have you not come back?" he asked. "Why have we not seen Chinese forces on American soil?" I could not answer that truthfully, could not tell him about the Dragon's Breath protocol, about the submarines and the invasion plans. So I said, "We are waiting for radiation levels to decrease to safe parameters." He did not believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but he did not press the issue. Instead, he said something that changed my entire perspective on the Great War. "You know, we are all just trying to survive. Chinese, American, does not matter anymore. The people who started the war, they are all dead. We are just the ones left picking up the pieces." He was right, and he was wrong. The people who started the war might be dead, but the people planning to continue it were very much alive, sitting in climate-controlled command centers 600 meters beneath Beijing, analyzing intelligence reports and updating invasion timetables. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. That encounter stayed with me, haunted me really. I returned to sub-Beijing and filed my standard reconnaissance report, leaving out the part about talking to an American soldier. Unauthorized contact with surface forces was punishable by reassignment to the deep tunnels, the maintenance crews who worked in the lowest levels where the temperature reached 40 degrees Celsius and the air smelled like sulfur and machine oil, or worse, execution for potential treason. But I could not stop thinking about what the paladin said. We are all just trying to survive. It seemed so simple, yet it contradicted everything I had been taught since birth. Americans were not just trying to survive in my education. They were the enemy, the capitalist aggressors who launched the first nuclear strikes against China. Except that was not true either, and I knew it from the classified documents I had read in the archive. Timothy Kane, one of the old world American developers, his notes survived in our intelligence files. China fired the first missile. We fired it after learning about America's forced evolutionary virus program, their illegal bioweapon research. We demanded they stop development. They did not. They just moved the program to different facilities. So we launched. And America launched back. and the world burned because neither side could stop themselves. I started digging deeper into the archive during my off-duty hours, started reading documents I definitely was not authorized to access. The Shadow Empire's true history was not as glorious as our propaganda suggested. The fortress cities were not built in some brilliant act of foresight. They were built in panic during the 1960s when tensions with the Soviet Union reached critical levels. The Communist Party expanded ancient tunnel systems dating back to the Ming Dynasty. Yes, but the real construction did not begin until 2063, only 14 years before the bombs fell. And we did not save 5 million people out of humanitarian concern. The Communist Party saved themselves and whoever they deemed useful: scientists, engineers, military personnel, loyal party members. There were selection criteria. If you were not valuable to the state's survival, you died on the surface with everyone else. My grandparents made the list because my grandfather was a nuclear physicist and my grandmother was a genetic researcher. Pure luck of profession. I found casualty estimates. Over 1 billion Chinese citizens died in the initial bombardment and the immediate aftermath. 1 billion. The Shadow Empire saved 0.5% of China's pre-war population. 0.5%. And we called ourselves victors. The more I learned, the more the Dragon's Breath Protocol disturbed me. In 2232, I was promoted to intelligence analyst, assigned to the Strategic Assessment Division on Level 1. My job was evaluating American faction capabilities based on reconnaissance reports and intercepted communications. We had listening posts scattered across the Pacific, monitoring radio frequencies, tracking troop movements, analyzing tactical patterns. The Brotherhood of Steel, the New California Republic, the Enclave Remnants, Caesar's Legion, the Institute. We knew about all of them. We had detailed files on their leadership, their technology, their weaknesses. We even had sleeper agents embedded in some factions. How do you think we knew so much about Vault-Tech's experiments? Some of our people made it into Vault populations before the bombs fell, carried genetic markers that made them resistant to the Vault's specific experiment parameters. I saw the invasion timetable in 2235. The Central Committee had set the date, October 23rd, 2277, 300 years exactly after the Great War. Poetic, horrifying. The plan called for simultaneous strikes on major American settlements. Nuclear submarines would surface off the California coast, deploy troops and armor. Stealth teams would sabotage key infrastructure. Our modified power armor divisions would overwhelm whatever resistance the scattered American factions could mount. Estimated American casualties in the first wave alone, 400,000, the entire population of the new California Republic at that time. The plan called it acceptable losses in the reclamation effort. I attended strategy meetings where generals discussed American fighters like they were insects to be exterminated. The Brotherhood wastes resources on technological preservation instead of production capacity. They pose minimal threat. The NCR spreads itself too thin across too much territory. Cut their supply lines and they collapse. Caesar's Legion are primitives with machetes. Our plasma weapons will cut through them like harvesting wheat. No one ever mentioned that these were human beings, survivors, people trying to rebuild civilization from the ashes, just like we were underground. They were just tactical obstacles, enemy forces, targets. During one meeting, I made the mistake of asking a question. General Lee, what happens to American civilians during our reclamation operations? Non-combatants? The room went silent. General Li Ming III, great-grandson of our original post-war commander, stared at me like I had grown a second head. Analyst Jiang, there are no civilians on the surface. There are only those who will submit to the People's Republic and those who will resist. We will offer submission once, and if they resist, then they demonstrate their capitalistic aggression and must be eliminated for the safety of our people. That is when I understood. The Dragon's Breath Protocol was not about reclaiming the surface. It was about conquest, about proving that China won the Great War by destroying whatever remained of America 200 years later. It was insane, pointless, a continuation of a conflict that should have ended when the last missile fell in 2077. I started making plans to defect, not immediately. You do not just walk away from the People's Underground Liberation Army. They track your movements, monitor your communications, assign political officers to watch for signs of ideological weakness. But I had advantages. I worked in intelligence. I knew the surveillance patterns. I knew which security checkpoints had blind spots. I knew which surface access tunnels were monitored and which ones had fallen into disuse. It took me 2 years to prepare. 2 years of maintaining perfect loyalty while secretly gathering supplies, a personal environmental suit, stolen piece by piece from equipment storage, radiation medication, smuggled from medical supplies, classified documents about the Dragon's Breath protocol, copied onto data chips small enough to hide in my boot heel, maps of American settlements, communication frequencies, anything that might prove useful if I actually made it to the surface alive. In 2237, I volunteered for a long-range reconnaissance mission to the ruins of Hong Kong. Standard patrol, checking radiation levels, assessing salvage opportunities. My team consisted of 5 soldiers, including me. We took the rail tunnel from Sub-Beijing to Sub-Hong Kong Fortress Epsilon, a smaller installation with only 300,000 inhabitants. Sub-Hong Kong was different from Sub-Beijing, cramped, older. The fortress predated the Great War by decades, built during the original Cold War tensions with the Soviets. They had expanded it after 2077, but the older sections still showed their age. Crumbling concrete, rust stains on the walls, air recyclers that wheezed and clanked like dying animals. We emerged on the surface through a concealed exit in the Kowloon ruins. The surface team dispersed according to standard patrol protocol, mapping radiation zones and marking salvage sites. I waited until we were 4 hours into the mission, until my teammates had spread out across several city blocks. Then I activated my suit's emergency beacon, standard distress call for radiation leak or equipment failure. My team lead's voice crackled over the radio. Delta 7, actual to Zhang. Report status. I had practiced this lie for months. Suit breach in the left leg seal. Radiation exposure increasing. I need immediate extraction to the entry point. Copy that. Fall back to extraction. We will rendezvous in 30 minutes. I did not go to the extraction point. I went north, moving through the ruins as fast as my suit would allow, putting distance between myself and my team. They would realize I was gone within an hour. They would search for maybe 6 hours before concluding I had been killed by radiation or mutated creatures. Acceptable losses. The People's Underground Liberation Army does not waste resources on prolonged search and rescue for one analyst. I walked for 3 days through the Hong Kong wasteland. Radiation burned through my suits, shielding by day 2, but the medication kept me alive. Barely. I rationed my food and water, drank from contaminated streams, and hoped the filtration system worked properly. At night, I huddled in ruined buildings and listened to things moving in the darkness, things that growled and clicked and made sounds no natural animal should make. On the 4th day, I reached the coast. The South China Sea stretched before me, contaminated and angry, waves that glowed faintly green in the twilight. I had brought a small inflatable raft, military grade, designed for emergency water crossings. It took me an hour to inflate it properly with the manual pump. I crossed to one of the smaller islands offshore, a place our intelligence maps marked as uninhabited. I was half right. No permanent human settlement, but I found evidence of other survivors. A makeshift shelter built from pre-war debris, empty radiation medicine containers, footprints in the sand that looked almost human, but the stride length was wrong, too long. I stayed on that island for 2 weeks, slowly dying from radiation poisoning despite the medication. My skin peeled, my hair fell out, I vomited blood every morning. I was ready to give up, ready to let the wasteland claim me when I saw the ship. An American vessel, pre-war military design, but retrofitted with salvaged parts and crude repairs. It flew no flag, but the crew spoke English with that distinct West Coast accent I had learned from intercepted radio broadcasts. Raiders, probably. Scavengers searching the Asian coastline for salvageable technology. I signaled them with a flare. Probably the stupidest decision of my life, but I was desperate. The ship changed course, approached the island. 6 crew members in makeshift armor, weapons drawn, suspicious of everything. Their captain was a woman named Sarah Chen, second-generation Chinese-American. Her grandparents had been vault dwellers in California. She looked at my crimson power armor with the golden dragon insignia and asked the same question the Brotherhood Paladin had asked. "What the hell are you?" I told her the truth. All of it. The Shadow Empire, the Fortress Cities, the 5 million survivors, the Dragon's Breath Protocol. I showed her the data chips with the classified documents. I explained that I was defecting because I could not be part of an invasion that would kill hundreds of thousands of people who had done nothing except try to survive. She did not trust me. Smart woman. She confiscated my armor, locked me in the ship's hold, told me if I was lying, she would throw me overboard and let the contaminated Pacific finish what the radiation started. But she took the data chips to her tech specialist, a former Brotherhood scribe who had gone freelance after some doctrinal dispute. 3 days later, Sarah opened the hold door. "Your documents are real. Holy shit, they are real. Do you understand what this means? There is a Chinese army underground preparing to invade America. That is why I am here," I said. "Someone has to warn them. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores." Sarah's ship took me to San Francisco, not the pre-war city, but what the she had rebuilt from the ruins. The irony was not lost on me. I had defected from the Chinese underground empire only to end up in a settlement founded by Chinese submarine survivors. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. The Shi were descendants of the Shi Huangti crew, a nuclear submarine that drifted into San Francisco Bay after the Great War when their systems failed. They had crawled out of that dead vessel and built something remarkable. The Steel Palace, constructed from the submarine's salvaged metal, a thriving community in what used to be Chinatown. They maintained Chinese culture and language, but they were not part of the Shadow Empire. They did not even know we existed. When I met with their leadership, with Ken Lee and the Council of Scientists, they looked at me like I was describing a fantasy. "Impossible," Dr. Feng said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed my documents. 5 million survivors, 147 fortress cities. We would have detected some evidence, radio signals, seismic activity from your tunneling operations, something. You did not detect anything because we maintained complete radio silence, I explained, and our plasma boring technology operates at frequencies that blend with natural seismic background noise. We designed it that way specifically to avoid detection. Ken Lee studied the invasion plans with growing horror. October 23rd, 2277. That is 40 years from now. You are telling me we have 40 years before a Chinese invasion force surfaces and attempts to conquer what is left of America? 39 years and 8 months, I corrected. The Shadow Empire runs on precise schedules. The Shah were technologically advanced, maybe the most advanced faction in the Wasteland outside the Institute. They had the capability to manufacture power armor, synthesize fuel from plant extracts and sea life, conduct nuclear research, but they stayed out of Wasteland politics. They preferred isolation, focusing on scientific advancement rather than territorial expansion. "This changes everything," Ken Lee said quietly. "If what you are saying is true, we cannot remain neutral. This threatens all surface survivors, not just Americans." He was right, but convincing the rest of the Wasteland proved nearly impossible. Sarah arranged a meeting with new California Republic officials in Shady Sands. I stood before President Tandis' successor, President Johansson, a grizzled veteran who had fought in the Brotherhood War and the Unity campaigns. I explained everything again, the fortress cities, the millions of survivors, the coming invasion. He listened politely, Then he said, "So you want us to believe that China, a country that was completely annihilated 200 years ago, somehow has a secret underground civilization planning to invade us, and your evidence is some data chips that could easily be fabricated?" The encryption on those files is pre-war People's Liberation Army military grade. The NCR's head of intelligence interjected. "We have verified it against captured Chinese equipment from Operation Anchorage historical records. This encryption style did not exist in the Wasteland. It is authentic." President Johansson rubbed his temples. "Even if this is real, what do you expect us to do?" The NCR is stretched thin across California, dealing with raiders, maintaining supply lines, trying to bring electricity and clean water to our settlements. You are asking us to prepare for an invasion that might happen 4 decades from now? "I am asking you to not be caught off guard when it happens," I said. "The Dragon's Breath Protocol calls for simultaneous strikes on major population centers. Shady Sands will be a primary target. You will have maybe 6 hours warning when our submarines surface, 6 hours to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people. What would you do if you were in President Johansson's position? Prepare for a potential threat decades away, or focus on the immediate problems facing your people?" Leave your thoughts in the comments. The Brotherhood of Steel was more receptive, mainly because Elder Maxon's advisors saw the potential technological intelligence I could provide. I spent 3 months at the Citadel in the capital Wasteland, debriefing with Brotherhood scribes and paladins. I drew diagrams of our power armor designs, our stealth systems, our plasma weapons. I explained how the Shadow Empire's manufacturing worked, how we maintained fusion reactors at depths where the heat could kill an unprotected human in minutes. A young scribe named Rothschild became obsessed with the fortress city designs. "Vertical cities stacked 9 levels deep," he muttered, sketching furiously in his notebook. "Each level a complete ecosystem. The engineering required for something like that. It is brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant. It is also vulnerable," I told him. "The fortress cities depend on their air recycling systems. Introduce a toxin or a biological agent into the ventilation, and you could kill thousands before anyone realized what was happening." Rothschild looked up from his notes. "You are giving us intelligence on how to attack your own people. They are not my people anymore. I made that choice when I defected, but saying it did not make it feel true. Somewhere beneath Beijing, my mother still tended her hydroponic gardens. My father still maintained the tunnel systems. My former colleagues still analyzed intelligence reports and updated invasion plans. They thought I was dead, killed in a surface accident. They had no idea I was actively working against everything they had spent their lives building. The guilt ate at me. Some nights I could not sleep, haunted by images of what would happen if the surface world actually attacked the fortress cities. My mother buried under tons of collapsed rock. My father drowned when someone sabotaged the water systems. Millions of people who had never chosen this conflict, who were just trying to survive underground like the vault dwellers survived underground, caught in the crossfire of a war that should have ended centuries ago. But then I would remember the invasion casualty estimates: 400,000 dead in the first wave, millions more if the fighting dragged on. The Dragon's Breath Protocol did not offer surrender terms or peaceful coexistence. It offered submission or death. In 2241, 4 years after my defection, something happened that changed the entire situation. A Brotherhood reconnaissance team discovered a Chinese intelligence bunker near Point Lookout. Inside, they found a functioning communication array still connected to a pre-war satellite network. And they found something else: a Chinese soldier, or what was left of one. His name was Lieutenant Feng. He had been part of a pre-war infiltration team, trapped in the bunker when the bombs fell. 200 years later, he had survived as a ghoul, his mind slowly deteriorating from radiation and isolation, but he retained enough cognitive function to operate the communications array. The Brotherhood brought him to me. We spoke in Mandarin, the first time I had used my native language with another Chinese speaker since my defection. He was lucid enough to understand what I was telling him about the Shadow Empire. "So they did it," he rasped, his ghoulified vocal cords making the words sound like gravel scraping against metal. The fortress city plan actually worked. I never thought. We always assumed it was propaganda, something to keep morale up while we ran our operations on American soil. It was real, I said. It is real. And they are planning to finish what we started in 2077. Feng laughed, a horrible wet sound. Finish it? Brother, there is nothing left to finish. Look at me. Look at what the Great War created. Monsters and ruins and radiation that will linger for 10,000 years. And they want to add more bodies to the pile? He helped me access the satellite network. The satellites were mostly dead, their systems degraded by centuries of exposure to cosmic radiation and solar flares. But a few still functioned, their cameras pointed at the Asian continent. We could not get detailed imagery, but we could detect thermal signatures and seismic activity. The Shadow Empire was expanding. New fortress cities under construction. The rail network extending deeper into western China, probably preparing staging areas closer to Pacific launch points. Heat signatures suggesting massive industrial activity, manufacturing operations running at capacity. They are accelerating the timetable, I said, analyzing the data. This level of activity suggests they are preparing for operations sooner than 2277. Feng manipulated the controls with his ruined hands, bringing up what looked like a communication log. This array receives automated status reports from Chinese military installations. Or it did, before the electromagnetic interference got too severe. Last transmission was, let me see, 2238. 3 years ago. He pulled up the transmission. It was encoded, but I still remembered the cipher keys from my intelligence training. I decrypted it while Feng watched with what might have been curiosity, hard to tell with his ghoulified features. The message was from Sub-Shanghai Central Command. Reconnaissance Operations Report, significant American faction consolidation in California region. New California Republic demonstrates unexpected organizational capacity and technological advancement. Recommend advancing Dragon's Breath timetable by 15 years to prevent further American military development. 15 years, I whispered. That means 2262, Feng finished. If they moved up the schedule in 2238, and you said we are in 2241 now. 21 years. We have 21 years. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had told the NCR they had 40 years to prepare. I had told the Brotherhood they had time to research countermeasures, develop defensive strategies. But if the Shadow Empire had accelerated their plans, everything changed. 21 years was not enough time. Not nearly enough. I spent the next month composing a message, a warning, but also an appeal. I used the satellite communication array to broadcast directly to Sub-Beijing, to the frequency I knew Central Command monitored. I identified myself by name and serial number, confirmed I was alive and defecting to American forces. Then I said, I know you are listening, General Lee. I know you think I am a traitor. Maybe I am, but I am also the only person in this wasteland who understands what you are planning and why you believe it is necessary. The surface world is not the enemy. The Great War is the enemy. The hatred that started it is the enemy. If you launch the Dragon's Breath protocol, you will not be reclaiming anything. You will just be proving that humanity learned nothing from watching the world burn. I did not expect a response. The Shadow Empire maintained absolute radio discipline, but 3 days later, the satellite array received a transmission, audio only, a voice I recognized immediately. General Li Ming, the third himself. Jiang Wei, we believed you dead. Learning of your defection brings me neither surprise nor disappointment. You always asked too many questions, showed too much empathy for the enemy. But you misunderstand our mission. We are not driven by hatred. We are driven by duty. The Communist Party's mandate is to restore Chinese civilization to its rightful place. America chose to attack China first with their bioweapons research. They chose mutual destruction. We are simply resolving the conflict they began. The people who made those choices are dead, I said, Everyone who started the Great War, Chinese and American, they are all dead. The people living on the surface now, they are just trying to survive. As are we, General Lee replied, 5 million souls depending on the Shadow Empire for survival. We exhaust our deep earth resources. We suffer equipment failures in our oldest fortress cities. We watch our population decline from genetic bottlenecking and radiation-induced mutations despite our best medical efforts. The surface offers resources we desperately need, space to expand, access to materials we can no longer mine from depleted underground deposits. For the first time, I understood. The Dragon's Breath Protocol was not just about conquest or ideology. It was about survival. The Shadow Empire was dying slowly underground, and they saw surface reclamation as their only option for long-term viability. Then, negotiate, I said. The NCR has trade agreements. The Brotherhood shares technology with allied factions. You do not need to invade. You could open diplomatic channels, offer your advanced technology in exchange for surface resources and settlement rights. The silence stretched so long I thought the transmission had cut out. Then, General Lee said, "You truly believe they would accept us? That American survivors would welcome millions of Chinese citizens emerging from underground? You have lived among them, Jiang Wei. Tell me honestly, would they see us as potential allies or as the enemy that destroyed their world 200 years ago?" I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that the Wasteland survivors had moved beyond the prejudices of the old world. But I thought about the propaganda I had seen in American settlements. The anti-Chinese posters still hanging in ruined buildings, the hatred in people's eyes when they talked about the Great War, the Brotherhood's obsession with eliminating foreign threats, Caesar's, Legion's xenophobic ideology. Even the NCR's expansionist tendencies treated outsiders with suspicion. I do not know, I admitted, but starting a war guarantees the answer will be no. Attempting diplomacy at least offers a chance. A chance we cannot afford to take, General Lee said. The Shadow Empire's survival depends on certainty, not chance. The Dragon's Breath Protocol proceeds as planned. This will be our final communication. Goodbye, Jiang Wei. I hope you find peace in your betrayal. The transmission ended. I sat in that bunker with Feng, staring at the dead communications console, knowing I had failed to change anything. That conversation with General Lee happened 7 years ago. It is now 22:48, and I am recording this confession in a Brotherhood safehouse outside New Vegas. In 13 years, the Dragon's Breath Protocol will launch. 13 years until Chinese submarines surface off the California coast and begin the second phase of a war that never really ended. You want to know what I have been doing for the past 7 years? Fighting a war that nobody else believes is coming. The NCR treats my warnings as paranoid delusions from a defector trying to justify his betrayal. The Brotherhood listens, but lacks the resources to mount a proper defense against an enemy they have never encountered. Caesar's Legion does not care about threats from across the Pacific when they are focused on conquering the Mojave. And the common people, the settlers and traders and farmers trying to scratch out a living in the wasteland, they are too busy surviving today to worry about threats 13 years away. I have trained resistance cells in anti-armor tactics. I have taught wasteland fighters how to disable Chinese stealth suits, how to identify weak points in our power armor designs. I have helped Brotherhood scribes reverse engineer the technical specifications I brought with me, developing countermeasures against weapons that will not arrive for over a decade. It feels like shouting into the void, but here is what keeps me going. Here is what makes me believe this confession might actually matter. In 2245, something happened that gave me hope. A Brotherhood patrol discovered another Chinese bunker, this one in Appalachia. Inside, they found ghouls, Chinese soldiers who had survived since the Great War. But these were not hostiles. They were people who had lived among Americans for 200 years, who had integrated into wasteland society, who had abandoned old-world allegiances in favor of simple survival. One of them was named Agent Mochu. She had been a People's Liberation Army spy, deep cover in American territory when the bombs fell. Her daughter, Jen, was fully Americanized, did not even speak Mandarin. When the Brotherhood brought me to meet them, Agent Mochu looked at my crimson armor with tears in her ghoulified eyes. "I thought I was the only one left," she said in Mandarin. "I thought everyone from the homeland had died." I told her about the Shadow Empire, watched her process the information that 5 million Chinese survivors lived beneath the homeland, preparing for invasion. She went silent for a long time. Then she said something that changed my entire perspective. "They are not preparing for invasion. They are preparing for extinction. The fortress cities cannot sustain 5 million people indefinitely. The resources do not exist. The genetic diversity does not exist. They are a civilization in a sealed container, slowly suffocating. The Dragon's Breath Protocol is not about conquest. It is about escape." She was right. I had been so focused on stopping the invasion that I had never considered why they were really doing it. The Shadow Empire was dying. Their deep earth mining operations had depleted accessible mineral deposits. Their fusion reactors were aging, requiring maintenance with parts they could no longer manufacture. Their population suffered from genetic defects caused by generations of limited breeding pools. They needed the surface not to dominate it, but to survive. This realization led me to a different approach. Instead of just preparing for war, I started working on something else. A proposal. A detailed plan for peaceful integration of Shadow Empire citizens into Wasteland society. It addressed every concern I could imagine: resource allocation, territorial agreements, technology sharing, cultural preservation, security guarantees. The proposal called for gradual emergence over 20 years. Small groups of Chinese citizens would surface through controlled exit points, bringing their advanced technology to trade for surface resources and settlement rights. The NCR would gain access to fusion reactor technology and advanced manufacturing capabilities. The Brotherhood would receive detailed technical specifications on pre-war Chinese military equipment. Smaller factions would benefit from medical technology and agricultural techniques developed in the hydroponic farms. In exchange, the Shadow Empire would receive mining rights to surface deposits, territory for settlement expansion, and genetic diversity to address their population bottleneck through controlled intermarriage programs. Both sides would benefit. Both sides would survive. I transmitted the proposal to Sub-Beijing through the satellite array. No response. I sent it again monthly for 2 years. Nothing. Radio silence. The Shadow Empire does not negotiate with defectors. But then, 6 months ago, something changed. The satellite array received a transmission, not from General Li, from someone I never expected to hear from again. My mother. Her voice sounded older, worn down by years in the underground darkness. "Wei, if you are listening, I need you to know something. Your father died 3 years ago. Tunnel collapse in Sector 7. He was inspecting a maintenance shaft when the supports gave way. They recovered his body, gave him a hero's burial in the memorial gardens. I sat in that bunker and cried for the first time since my defection. My father, the man who had taught me how to read tunnel diagrams, who had explained how plasma boring technology worked, who had believed in the Shadow Empire's mission with absolute faith, dead, crushed under the weight of the civilization he had spent his life maintaining. My mother continued, "Things are bad here, Wei, worse than the propaganda admits. Sub-Beijing experienced a reactor failure last year. Level 8 is permanently contaminated, evacuated. We lost 40,000 people to radiation exposure before they sealed the sector. The Central Committee says it was sabotage, but everyone knows the truth. Our systems are failing, the equipment is too old, and we do not have replacement parts." She paused. I could hear her breathing, ragged and tired. "Your proposal reached us. I do not know how, but copies circulated among the engineering staff. Some of us, we think it could work. We think peaceful integration is possible, but the Central Committee will not consider it. General Lee says negotiation shows weakness, that the American factions would exploit any sign of desperation. Then, she said something that made my blood run cold. They have accelerated the timetable again. The Dragon's Breath protocol launches in 12 years now. 2260. They are moving it up because they are afraid the fortress cities will not last much longer. Shanghai reported complete air recycling failure in their level 6. 200,000 people died in 72 hours. The other fortress cities are experiencing similar system degradation. 12 years, not 1312, and not because they wanted to conquer America, but because they were running out of time before their underground civilization collapsed completely. Wei, I do not know if what you did was right or wrong, but I know you did it because you believed it would save lives. I am proud of you for that, and I am sorry we could not give you a world where you did not have to make that choice. The transmission ended. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I have been working frantically to convince someone, anyone, to take the threat seriously. To prepare defenses, yes, but more importantly, to prepare diplomatic channels. Because now I understand what is really at stake. If the surface world does not negotiate, 5 million Chinese citizens will die when their fortress cities finally fail. And if the Dragon's Breath protocol launches as planned, hundreds of thousands of American survivors will die in the fighting. Everyone loses. The hatred wins. The Great War claims millions more victims 280 years after the first bombs fell. There is a third option, the option nobody wants to consider, because it requires trusting former enemies. The surface world could send diplomatic envoys to designated emergence points. The Shadow Empire could send representatives topside for preliminary negotiations. Both sides could choose to see each other as survivors rather than enemies. It will not be easy. There is too much history, too much pain. American survivors remember Chinese invasion forces in Alaska. Chinese survivors remember American bombers over Beijing. Both sides lost billions of people. Both sides suffered unimaginable horror. Forgiveness is not simple when you are standing in the ashes of the old world. But what is the alternative? Another war? More bodies, more radiation, more proof that humanity learned nothing from its first attempt at mutual annihilation? I think about that Brotherhood paladin I met in the Commonwealth ruins 20 years ago. We are all just trying to survive. Chinese, American, does not matter anymore. He was right then. He is right now. The people in the fortress cities did not start the Great War. The people in the wasteland settlements did not start it either. We are all just the descendants of that catastrophe, trying to build something from the ruins. Here is what I want you to understand. This is not just history. This is not just a story about pre-war conflicts and underground civilizations. This is happening right now, in your wasteland, in your timeline. Somewhere beneath China, engineers are retrofitting nuclear submarines for trans-Pacific deployment. Soldiers are training for surface assault operations. Millions of people are preparing to emerge from the earth and fight a war they do not want but believe they need. And somewhere in the Mojave, in California, in the capital wasteland, survivors are going about their lives completely unaware that in 12 years, everything changes. What would you do? If you knew an invasion was coming, would you prepare for war or try for peace? Would you see the Chinese as enemies or as desperate people making desperate choices? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know because I still do not have a good answer myself. I have arranged for this recording to be distributed through Wasteland radio networks after my death. If you are hearing this, I am probably gone. The Shadow Empire does not forgive defectors, and they have had 20 years to send assassins topside. Or maybe I will die fighting in the Dragon's Breath War, caught between the civilization I abandoned and the people I tried to warn. Either way, this is my testimony, my confession, my attempt to bridge a gap that has existed since October 23rd, 2077. The Shadow Empire is real. The fortress cities are real. The 5 million Chinese survivors are real, and the coming war is real unless someone, somewhere, chooses to break the cycle. To my mother, if you ever hear this, I am sorry I could not save Father. I am sorry I left you alone in the darkness. But I would make the same choice again because I still believe that survival does not require victory. It just requires the courage to stop fighting. To General Lee and the Central Committee, your people are dying because you are too proud to ask for help. The surface world has resources you need and you have technology they need. Trade instead of war. Negotiate instead of invade. The Communist Party's mandate is to preserve Chinese civilization, but there is more than one way to do that. To the survivors of the American wasteland, when the Chinese emerge in 12 years, you will have a choice. See them as the enemy that destroyed the old world, or see them as fellow survivors trying to escape a slow death underground. Your choice will determine whether the Great War finally ends, or enters its third century. I know what I am asking is difficult. Trust is hard when the radiation still lingers from the last time nations trusted each other with nuclear weapons. But the alternative is more death, more destruction, more proof that humanity is doomed to repeat its mistakes until there is nothing left worth fighting over. This is Zhang Wei, formerly Lieutenant Commander of the People's Underground Liberation Army, currently a defector living in borrowed time. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. Whatever you choose it knowing that both sides of this conflict are just people trying to survive in a world that tried very hard to kill us all. The Great War does not have to claim any more victims. We can stop it. We just have to want peace more than we want revenge. The recording ends here. What happens next is up to you.